Great moments are born from great opportunity.
If you want to be loved as real champions, worthy champions, you're going to have to work and improve and change.
The inches we need are everywhere around us.
Hell yeah.
They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second.
Being perfect is about being able to look your friends in the eye and know that you didn't let them down because you told them the truth. And that truth is that you did everything that you could. There wasn't one more thing that you could have done. Can you live in that moment?
If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
This is your time.
The only ones who are going to tell me when I'm through doing my thing is you people here.
Welcome in, you people. I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks again for joining us here on The Man in the Arena. How's everybody doing? Because here we go, another edition of The Sports Reporters. A reminder again that you can catch us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Also, don't forget, you go to the Welcome to the Arena site on YouTube. You can go ahead and download every show when it's done there. And, oh yeah, by the way, you'll see it up right to the left of my head here. Subscribe to us on YouTube at welcometothearena.com. Also, you can go to all the major audio podcast platforms when the show is done a little bit later on, and you can download the audio of the show today. There I go. I got everything out. Let's get to it because we got a whole lot to do. As someone told me a long time ago, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there. So let's go ahead and do it. I am thrilled about having this match together on the Sports Reporters because I have followed both of these gentlemen for so many years. They are the epitome of what great sports writing is all about. And that's why when we talk about sports reporters, these are the guys who have done it for so many years, and they've got more stories than anybody can possibly imagine. I think I've got stories sometimes. They tell them, they write them, and as a matter of fact, I have, without question, patterned a little bit of what I've done over the years on their work, having read it and seen it. We'll talk about that momentarily. Let me go ahead and welcome my first guest. He is a New York Times best-selling author. He has been on Welcome to the Arena, Man in the Arena, and the Sports Reporters before here. There's possibly not a faction of sports that he hasn't covered. But right now, he's happy to go ahead and watch the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. It's a pleasure to welcome Peter Golenbock into the Sports Reporters. Peter, happy man with those Rays in there, aren't you, brother?
I'm pinching myself every single day. This is a team nobody thought they would ever get past Toronto. Never mind past the Yankees. And never mind being 3-0 against the Houston Astros. We don't sleep at night, I have to tell you.
I'm going to give you every chance to gloat a little bit later on.
Oh, thank you.
I know that you're going to want that time.
We went to the World Series in 1908, which, if I do my math, that was 12 years ago.
About 12 years ago. That's not bad. Yeah. You're close.
That's
but
right.
We'll talk about the Rays in Major League Baseball in just a little bit, so hang tight. Let me introduce also a gentleman that when I worked at radio stations and TV stations, I read his material because it always came over the wire service. There were a lot of wire services, but frankly, when you worked in the business, you trusted the Associated Press, and you still do to this day. And when it came to sports, I did the audio. I did reports from all over the country for AP Audio. But in the writing side of things, I caught his work because, frankly, it was the best to read. It is a pleasure to welcome for the first time to the Sports Reporters, Hal Bock joins us on the show. There he is, the man, the legend himself. How you doing, Hal?
Good to be here. It's very nice introduction.
I'm serious. There was. This comes from the old days of the wires when we had, first it was the wire machines, but then it was the computerized wire machines, just the little boxes almost. You go in, rip and read. There it is. I could read Hal Bock, and I never had to worry about getting it wrong. You have that thank you from those of us who are in the business for so many years. Gentlemen, we got a lot to do and a lot of things to talk about here today, and we're going to start out right away with some news. We're doing the show, and we do the show live on Wednesday, October 14th in the afternoon, and this is a story that has only come out within the last hour while we're doing it live. At the University of Florida, COVID-19 has exploded. They now have 19 players that have tested positive, and I am told from people who are on the ground that 19 is conservative. I have some people telling me that it is closer to 30 by the time you get done if you want to get into the actual tally. But we have a head coach here who said during the week, oh, don't worry about it. Come on, 90,000 people. Let's go ahead and get that LSU game in there. Gentlemen, it is one of the most reckless things I have ever seen a coach do, but does this not prove once and for all that these coaches aren't in it for the players' health? They're not in it for the players' safety. If they're in it for the money and the games, and that's what Dan Mullen was there for. Honestly, guys, I wouldn't send my kid to the University of Florida to play football under Dan Mullen on a bet. And now here we are with these players being infected. What does it tell us about college football in general?
Well, let me chime in on that, Ed. I just find it outrageous that they are carrying on, for example, the Big Ten. The Big Ten canceled its sports, and they're going to wait it out. Good. And the next thing you know, they're back in the business. They're starting up. And the Pac-12, same deal. They followed the Big Ten, and they said, we're going to suspend our season. And the next thing you know, they're back in it. You know, money drives this industry. And the lack of broadcasting income for these schools really drove these decisions. And I find it outrageous to put kids at risk for the All-American dollar. I mean, these are supposed to be student athletes, and to force them into games, I just think it's foolish. This is a pandemic. This is a once-in-a-lifetime arrangement.
Let me get my English correct here. Should we be surprised at all, Peter, that this happens? Because Hal mentioned the money. There's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake here, especially in college football. These coaches are getting paid $7, $8, $9 million a year, and that's all they're there for is to win games. So why should they give a damn about the players? Look. Kid gets hurt, don't worry about it. We'll bring somebody else in, we'll replace him. I mean, that's always been the philosophy of college football, at least in the last 20, 30 years, yes?
Well, there's another aspect of this. And it happens to be, of course, the University of Florida is in where? Florida. So we have a governor, DeSantis, who I won't say that his head is very approximate to President Trump's you-know-what, but it is. And so we have a president who has determined that the entire COVID-19 pandemic is a hoax. And so we have a governor of the state of Florida who is opening up the entire state so that, you're talking money, so that the restaurants and all these other businesses, and so the colleges stay open and nobody goes bankrupt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not considering the fact that this pandemic has killed 212,000 people in America, that more than 1,000 people in Florida are infected every single day. So it's not at all surprising that the coach of the University of Florida is taking his playbook, in a sense, from the governor and the president. And they've decided this whole pandemic, as sick as these kids may get, nobody's going to die. They're young, they can handle it. And so we're going to play. And
but does this not just tell us again that and we should all know this, we do, certainly everybody else should, that it's college football, it's about the money, it's about the wins, it's not about the safety. We're going to talk about the NFL in a little bit when it comes to that. But with college athletics, certainly, they have always had this holier-than-thou attitude that this is about education. Look, I remember when everybody tried to snow job us for years, talking to us about how the NCAA and college athletics was all about the education of the player first. Bullspit. It was about winning games, and it's more about winning games now than it ever was before. So should we not be surprised at all that at every major program you're going to have a reckless coach, and they're not going to give a damn about the players' health? It's all about the money. So we throw up our hands and we shouldn't be surprised, right?
It's disturbing, though. It's disturbing. They're supposed to have the best interest of their athletes, of their student athletes at heart, and they don't. They don't. It's, and for them to come out and say, oh, it's all about the education of our athletes. No, it's not. It's about the all-American dollar. And I mean, it's just very, very disturbing to me that this goes on in America.
But is it not fair to say also that the only thing that would really stop that would be if somebody died?
People die all the time.
But on the football program, somebody on the football program, if a coach, look, Baylor got hit with 35 coaches and players that were infected by this. And the coaches aren't all 19, 20, 21. You're dealing with coaches sometimes that are 40, 50, 60 years of age. Isn't it fair to say that this kind of an attitude will continue until someone, or if, God forbid, until if someone dies?
Well, they don't have to die. They just have to be hospitalized.
It happens every year in training. We had a kid from the University of Maryland. I wrote a column about him last year. He died during training because they drove these kids. There are high school kids here in New York on Long Island who have died during preseason training because they drive them too hard. I mean, it's just terrible. It's a terrible thing. It really is.
Peter, what were you saying there?
I was saying they don't have to die, but if a number of them end up in the hospital on ventilators, they're going to think twice about this. You know, until that happens, though, they're taking, as I said, the page book out of Ron DeSantis's football playbook, which is to say that this pandemic is no more dangerous than the flu, is what President Trump said.
Well, remember, it's all going to disappear magically one day, right?
It will somehow if you drink bleach, you know.
So here we have college athletics with one side of COVID-19. Let's turn to the National Football League here for a moment, because I specifically remember a time when the National Football League was rash in concussions of the players, and they explained it away as no big deal. They didn't have concussion protocols. The helmets were just fine, yet the medical advice and the medical findings were right in front of them at the time, and we've already known, and it's been proven that the NFL knew about it. They held it from their players, and then we have a rash of players who are dying thanks to the effects of CTE. Now the NFL tells us, well, don't worry, there's only a few players here that have tested positive and a few players here, and we're doing our best. Gentlemen, why should we believe anything the National Football League says when it comes down to, again, the cash, the schedules, and I wouldn't hold it past them to just flat out lie about the COVID-19 numbers to make sure that the fans and the players are all healthy and safe and not concerned. And the website Deadspin came out this week and said they have some players that are terrified of COVID-19, but they're afraid of the blowback if they say anything.
Hal?
Well, the interesting part of this is, you know, this thing broke out in February. We first learned of this pandemic in February. And it was in the middle of the National Hockey League season, the middle of the National Basketball Association season. And to his credit, Adam Silver came up with an idea. He said, we're going to have a bubble. We're going to bring all the teams into Orlando, into Disney World, and that's what we're going to play. And Gary Bettman of the NHL saw this, and he thought, that's a pretty good idea. Let's do the same thing for our league. And the NBA and the NHL were able to resume play, complete their seasons, crown a champion, and with very little disruption. Baseball, on the other hand, and football, on the other hand, they aren't as tuned in, and they tried to press ahead with the grand old game and the schedule the way it should be and so forth. Doesn't work. We're in a very unique time here in America, and you have to recognize that, and you have to adjust to it. Silver and Bettman did, and baseball and football have not. And so we had a game last night, Tuesday Night Football, because they had to reschedule because of the breakout in Tennessee, where 20 or so players came down with it.
The schedule's a mess.
The schedule is all scrambled in both baseball and football. You've got National League teams playing in American League cities for the playoffs. I mean, it's goofy.
But here's the thing that I want to push forward here, and Peter, I'll get to you first on this. The question comes down to that again. knowing that the National Football League lied bold-faced to their players, to the fans, to everybody about CTE and concussion protocols over decades. Why should we believe them now when they tell us only a few players have tested positive for COVID-19 and it's no big deal?
Well, there's no reason to believe them at all. I mean, with the CTE, you're seeing lawsuits now from the widows of these wonderful football players, and it's costing the NFL multiple millions and millions of dollars because it's so clear that they knew that if you take enough hits to the head, eventually you're going to end up with CTE. And if you're not lucky, at the age of 50, you're going to be dead. And it's exactly what happened. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing. In terms of the COVID, they want these games to happen. And they're going to do everything they can to make sure they did. Now, the Patriots the other night were unfortunate because their quarterback came down with it. And I don't know, I guess they were afraid of infecting the whole team. So they postponed the game a couple of days. I don't quite understand it because supposedly if you catch the thing, you're supposed to be in quarantine for 14 days.
Thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out.
I'm not quite sure why it was that the Patriots didn't have to wait 14 days to play that football game.
Well, shouldn't we also say then that what you've pointed out is a good concept here? Because the New England Patriots lost their star player, their number one quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't care who caught it, how he caught it, but they lost their number one. You now have a season that has been changed because schedules have been changed, which puts the players off the way that they prepare in the National Football League in a certain way. You have teams that are losing their star players. You have wins and losses that are affected. You have games that are affected. You have championships that are affected. Is it not fair to say, Hal, I'll throw this to you first, that the National Football League 2020 season must have a COVID-19 asterisk next to it when everybody looks back at this year?
Without question, Ed. And I think the same thing holds for baseball. I love the Tampa Bay Rays, Peter. They're America's team. But this season...
Nobody has ever said that before. Not since 1998.
I'm here for you.
Just made his day. We're stopping the show right here. That's it. Peter's all done. You can go away now. Go ahead, Hal. Continue.
Well, no, it's just that everything is so goofy in baseball this season with the new rules that they put into place, the 7-inning doubleheaders, the man on second base in extra innings, all of that stuff. It's not baseball. It's some hybrid sport. And the whole season deserves an asterisk as far as I'm concerned.
What about that, Peter?
I'm just thrilled they're friggin' playing. All I care about is that I can turn the TV on and I can watch two teams, even if they're from the Korean League. I don't care, as long as I can watch baseball on television.
But does that not say, and I think Hal's... No, go ahead,
How
Hal.
do you feel about having a man on second base at the start of the 10th inning?
Well, see, that's the next thing I want to get to here.
They're only doing that for this season.
That's not baseball.
Well, it's baseball at other levels. It's baseball for slow pitch softball. They've done it. They do it. In women's softball. I mean, it's done, and it's not the worst thing in the world as long as when the season begins next year, they don't continue to do it.
You see, I'm a traditionalist, and I believe in the game that was invented by Doc Adams in the 1840s. And not able Abda Doubleday, he had nothing to do with it. But I mean, the game, as we played it for 100 and some years, 150 years, was a great game. That's the game I fell in love with. The game they're playing today is not the same game. At least the game they played this season is not the same game. It's a hybrid, and I can't endorse it. I'm sorry.
Well, but see, that's the point I wanted to get in here too, Peter, because I know that you and other baseball fans are thrilled that the Rays are there and the season goes on. I get that. As a baseball fan, it's great to be able to watch them here in a year where, I mean, we lived summertime and we had nothing.
Or the Yankees or the Orioles or Toronto or, anybody else. I mean, it's not just the Rays. The fact that we could turn the TV on and watch TV. Unfortunately, the people who run baseball today are so afraid that they're losing fans, that people who are under the age of 40 are playing video games, which they're doing. So they're not watching baseball, they're not watching football, they're not watching hockey, they're not watching tennis, they're not watching much of anything. They're playing video games. And so one of the criticisms of the game of baseball and other games as well is it takes too long. So I do believe that one of the reasons they're putting a runner on second base is so that we don't have a 6-hour baseball game.
Well, okay, but if you're going to change the rules, that's the point. If you're going to change the rules, and many of these rules have been in effect because of the COVID-19 shortened season. So if you're going to do that, that was the earthquake that hit Florida every now and then, in case everybody wonders every now and then. There's earthquakes that hit every now and then in Tampa Bay. It's okay.
Camera.
But if you're going to do that and change the rules for this season, almost in midstream, you have got to put an asterisk or a special marker next to the 2020 season in Major League Baseball because it's unlike any other season. You can't measure it against other years.
You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that, Ed. By definition, you're playing a 60-game regular season. Everybody knows it's not 162. You're playing fewer games. You're playing it, not in front of fans. I mean, I'm a season ticket holder with the Rays, and they wouldn't let me come and watch the games. I said, look, I'll sit in the rafters for crying out loud.
Do they not know who you are?
100 feet of somebody else, but they wouldn't let me come and watch the games, which is annoying as all hell. And so, my attitude is, okay, you're going to make it so now that the relief pitcher has got to face 3 batters, and that's another time reason. They don't want 42 relief pitchers in one game, each one pitching to 1 batter. They want to make sure you have fewer pitchers, which takes less time to make the changes. That's why they did that. Does that bother me? Yeah, I don't know. It's not the worst thing in the world. The bottom line is we get to watch baseball.
Did they have a shutout with 9 pitchers? Was it 10?
Yeah, sure. You can have a shutout with 9 pitchers. Each pitcher pitches to 3 batters, and there's 27 outs.
See, that doesn't bother me. To be honest, situationals don't bother me that much, although I think they need to be. Although the shift in the outfield to me needs to be banned completely because I think
it doesn't need to be.
Shift is ridiculous. It's like you're playing junior league softball. Come on, Peter, that's not baseball.
Hit the ball left field.
That's not baseball.
Be a hitter. I mean, look, everybody is now swinging up. This is the new deal. We're swinging up to hit more home runs, and so you have, at least with the Rays, every single game, 10 or 11 or 12 Rays strike out. Now they score 3 runs and win the game. They win the game 3-2.
Game. That's not baseball. I want to see a stolen base. I want to see a hit and run. I want to see a bunt.
Well, unfortunately, Hal, unfortunately, Joe Morgan is dead, and Tom Seaver is dead, and Bob Gibson is dead, and all of these wonderful people who did all the things we loved them to do back in the 60s and 70s are all dead. And this is a new way of playing the game of baseball. All these teams want home run hitters, and they don't care if people strike out. They used to have players who walked more often than they struck out. But apparently nobody cares about the walk anymore. Well, the Rays do, but nobody else does. Nobody cares, whether you hit and run or you sacrifice bunt. They threw the sacrifice bunt.
Well, most guys don't even know those skills to begin with. They're not even taught. I mean, how many times have we gone to spring training, and when I've gone there, you don't really see guys doing bunt drills anymore, hit and run drills anymore. You really don't see them focusing on the elements of the game that are important because I guess for whatever reason, they think that fans don't want to see it, or the players just don't care, or the coaches don't care. I don't know what the reason is. I really don't.
They've changed the way they want offense to go, and they want people to score on home runs. And I can see that my camera is cutting me in half, so I'm going to do something about that. There you go.
There you go.
That's part of television.
Part of television.
There you go.
So we're all in, rolling TV now.
Okay.
But the issue is here. Can we agree that, and we've pointed this out, the 2020 season has to be noted as an anomaly. In Major League Baseball,
you're going to
more than any other sport.
You're going to note it as an anomaly. You don't have to say it. You don't need asterisks. Everybody on the planet knows that it's an anomaly. They know that. You know how they know it? Because you can't go to the damn games and watch them play. That's how you know.
Well, will they know 50 years from now that this season was an anomaly?
50 years from now, Hal, neither you nor I will care.
That's not the point. Somebody will care. There'll be people replacing us, Peter.
Yeah, they're still arguing about Roger Maris's asterisks. You know that. They're still arguing whether Roger should have an asterisk on his 61 home runs.
Well, but that's fair. If we're still arguing that point, and that's what we're talking about now, 50 years, more than that, 60 years. Is it not fair to say that they're going to be arguing about it in 60 years? Or maybe they won't. Maybe society will change and they don't care. You know, maybe the fan won't care.
They don't care.
Okay. That will then bring us to...
I tell you who'll care. I tell you who will care. The traditionalists will care. The Hal Bock traditionalists will care.
Okay.
And they'll care a lot.
But there's not a lot of those left.
The game. It's as simple as that. I respect the game.
Right.
And to me, this is not the game that I respect.
So then let's move this on to then...
On second base? How did he get on second base? Explain the statistics.
He was awarded second base.
An earned run? I mean, all of this counts. All of this matters to me.
This to me is
we got to write letters to the commissioner.
Oh, please. I'm not
letters?
sure the commissioner reads my mail.
What is this letter you speak of? What are these letters you speak of?
A letter. You write a letter. You write a letter.
Letters anymore?
Yes,
this brings
letters.
us then to something I wanted to talk about with two gentlemen who have been there, and I certainly was brought up in it in the early years, and that is sports reporting, if you will, because we have a demise of real sports reporting in this country now. It is all about the hot take, which to me is just despicable because that's all we seem to be based on these days. We've lost the ability to tell great stories. They appear every now and then on the web. But is it not fair to say that when it comes down to sports reporting, whether or not people want that or we just want to give it to them, that it's a lost art. It's gone. It's basically 140 characters on Twitter, and if you can't do that, Hal, then you may as well go ahead and surrender because nobody really tells stories or reports on the events anymore.
Part of the problem, as I see it, is the relationship between sports writers and athletes. There was a time when athletes, they made a good living that was comparable to the living that a journalist could make. And then all of a sudden we had free agency and suddenly everybody's making $1 million. Well, journalists don't make $1 million. So the writers did not have the same relationship with athletes that they once had. And athletes just kind of snub them. And it's tough to get a story sometimes. Sometimes I remember getting stories because athletes were intrigued with things that I said to them. Like one time I had a baseball writer's card. I think my last card was number 14. And the lower numbers were more prestigious because it meant you've been doing this for a while. And I came up to a relief pitcher with the Tigers in the clubhouse, and I started to talk to him, and he said, "Whoa, wait a minute, you're number 14." And I looked around, and I'm thinking, what? Yeah, I have number 4. Hey! And this guy went to his teammates and said, he's number 14. So this all of a sudden gave me some stature in the Tigers clubhouse. I mean, there are things like that. One time I talked to Angel Pagan, who was an outfielder with the Mets at the time. And we started talking, and he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 70 years old." He said, "Boy, you look great for 70. All of a sudden, we had a relationship. That doesn't exist anymore. That kind of give and take doesn't really exist anymore. The athletes are so far away in their own little world that it's difficult to get close to them and to get the stories that we once got. So that's in my view, that's the reason that you're not getting the same kind of quality of journalism that you once did."
Peter, is it not fair to say that... Oh, go ahead, Pete.
At the same time, you're having fewer and fewer newspapers. I mean, that's part of the problem, too. We have the Tampa Bay Times. We have the Tampa Bay Times, 2 magnificent sports journalists, Mark Topkin and John Romano, who write for the Tampa Bay Times. Every day they write either a column or they write an article or 2 articles about the Rays, and they write it. They're beautiful writers. They're very intelligent. They write things you want to read. And so they're there. There are people like that. But unfortunately, as newspapers around the country are starting to fold, you're seeing fewer and fewer of them. There are other papers, something called The Athletic, which is sort of an independent paper.
Which seems to do a pretty good job. They're on subscription. They have to find a way to survive, and their writers are excellent.
Their writers are excellent. You certainly have Sports Illustrated, which is still a very fine magazine. ESPN has a very fine magazine.
Yeah, hang on. I'm going to stop you there because let's hit that on Sports Illustrated, because I no longer have the subscription. I dumped it 2 years ago. The writing is horrible. The reporting is terrible. There are no great stories anymore, my opinion, completely. And if you look at it, it's not a magazine anymore. ESPN magazine's not a magazine. It's all about flash and trash. There's no great, gripping stories to tell anymore because the players don't trust anybody, because many times, and I know I keep hitting becauses here, I'm trying to get into a run here on this, many of the reporters and people sent in to talk to these athletes have no clue what they're doing, have no idea the questions to ask, have no idea the history of the game or the individuals. They're there to ask them questions like, so does your kid like Malamars or Oreos? Would you rather drive a motorcycle or a bicycle? And oh yeah, by the way, do you like the new Megan Thee Stallion album? Come on, that's what they do these days. And the players aren't being asked anything that anybody wants to know about that really is a great story, Peter. Isn't that part of it as well?
No, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. I dropped my SI subscription about the same time that you did as a protest because they had laid off half their staff. And so how good was the journalism going to be when you have half the people who were putting it out on the street? I thought that was awful. And they previously had laid off their photographers. Part of it is the economics of the industry. This is a difficult industry in which to make a buck. For the owners and for the owners of the newspapers, and so many papers, as Peter pointed out, have just gone out of business. It's a shame. It's a terrible thing.
Well, if they're going to come back and say to us and say to me, they're going to say, "Get off my lawn, Ed," because you can scream all you want about writers and quality of writing, but we can't sell the magazines anymore, and we can't sell the newspapers because nobody wants those stories anymore. All they want are quick texts, and they want something quick on Twitter or something easy on Facebook that's 60 seconds long, and they walk away from it. So if people don't want those in-depth stories anymore, what the hell am I spending the money for?
You're 100% right. I often see people walking in the street looking at their telephones, reading their telephones. And I thought, how can you get any kind of perspective, any kind of information from the screen of a telephone? It's not very much there. But apparently people are satisfied with that.
And Peter, you spend time on all the novels that you write. I mean, you and I have spoken about this, the multitude of athletes that you have spoken to. And in your books, you get that chance to sit there and expand and tell the story. From an author's standpoint, are people still into that even? Are they still into those in-depth books where they want to learn more?
Well, I'm sure that they are. Recently, I've got it sitting right next to me. Andre Agassi's book. How do we do this, sir? This way? That way?
I'll do it here. There you go. I got you full screen now. Everybody can see it.
Andre Agassi's book, Open, which is absolutely magnificent. I mean, you want to know who Andre Agassi is? Read that book. It is stunningly terrific. I'm doing a book with Bobby Valentine right now. Bobby Valentine and I have spent the last 3 months talking, and he's another one who's magnificent. When he was in Japan, they named a street after him called Valentine's Way. And I thought that was so fantastic that I'm going to call this going to be the title of the book, called Valentine's Way. He's just one of the neat people on this earth. And he's gone through so much as both a player. I mean, he was going to be a guy who was going to be. Let's put it this way: he was drafted 5th in 1968. Thurman Munson was drafted 4th by the Yankees. He was drafted 5th by the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he was going to be a superstar until he broke his leg, and that was pretty much it for his superstardom. And then he became a manager, and to listen to him talk about what it's like to actually be a manager in the major leagues was just so incredibly interesting. Not only do you have to satisfy your general manager, you have to satisfy the owner, you have to satisfy your players.
But
you
is
have
it
to
interesting
satisfy
to the 20-something
of your players, and you have to satisfy the press.
Is it interesting to the 20-something, though, Peter? Is it interesting to the 30-something?
I honestly, I hope so, but I just think if you're interested in the world of baseball, if that's what you're interested in, and I know that there are people who are in their 20s and 30s, because I've talked to them, they will be interested in a book like this. Now, will there be as many 20s and 30s interested in reading as people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s? Well, I mean, Hal's talking about the people on the telephone. I mean, my son has 4 telephones.
Does he get all his information from it?
I never asked him the question, but I
Probably
suspect
does.
So. Probably.
I mean, there's still the ability to read, but it seems as if nobody wants to spend the time to read. Which
well, don't say nobody. Don't say nobody, because there are 330 million people in this country. So even if it's 10%, that's 33 million people. That's not a small number of people.
Okay, I sit corrected, but I will say that more people than 20 years ago, don't seem to want to read in-depth stories. I do. I search for them. I'd like to even write them. And books like yours and books that Hal has written and been involved in, I would rather read those, which is why I no longer do Sports Illustrated or ESPN, the magazine. I have a lot of friends at ESPN, but that magazine was a joke from the minute it was launched because it really was all about lifestyle. It wasn't about sports.
They used to have some wonderful writers.
Not for long.
Well, not anymore. Frank DeFord was a spectacular writer. He wrote for Sports Illustrated for 20, 30 years. He was absolutely wonderful. I mean, the writers for Sport Magazine, Roger Kahn and Ed, what's Ed's last name? He wrote that fabulous book on Willie Mays. All right.
Remember.
Can't come up with it right now, but there were wonderful writers for Sport Magazine. But again, we're talking, as Hal knows, in the 1960s, the 1970s,
we're talking
and
60s
then into
and
the 1980s. The cell phone has changed the world. It has.
Let's then transition over to something close to this, because this is a conversation that I've had with some friends recently. And a lot of it had to do with that relationship between the player and the fan. Now, time was when players actually enjoyed being around the fans. Not anymore. We saw that change. I certainly saw that change when fantasy sports came around and when people came around to get autographs, and the players got wise, knowing that a lot of people were getting the autographs not to keep at home, but to go out and sell on the open market. And then the players stopped doing autographs. And I've talked to a number of athletes who say that they know that all they are to a lot of people are a dollar sign because of gambling, and especially fantasy sports. Because I think fantasy sports is gambling. No matter how you slice it, that's what it is. You're gambling on somebody being able to hit a number, being able to do something in a competitive effort. It's almost like a horse. You're hoping that they'll be able to win and make you money. What I've gotten back is there's that disintegrating relationship between athlete and fan, not just because of that, but because of other issues as well. Social media has driven a wedge where players think they're really being close to the fans when, in essence, the fans hammer away at them, sometimes incessantly. You suck, you're this, you can't do this. There's been threats to players' wives and husbands that comes out of social media. So can we not also put in this, Hal, that a part of this is the players just don't want to be close to the fans anymore because they don't need to. They're making the money, and the fans show up, and there's that wall that goes up, and I don't think we're ever going to get it back.
I think many players view fans as a necessary evil. You sell tickets, they sell tickets. Those people buy tickets, and so we got to have them in the building. Not this season, obviously, because of the pandemic. But I think that's the view that players have of fans. They don't want to be close to fans. Fans are dangerous. Fans can be dangerous, and they don't want to expose themselves to that kind of trouble. I know some players who were terrific with fans, who would open up all the time, leaving the ballpark, going to their car. They'd stop and sign autographs. Very happy to do it. That's past. That's in the past.
Well, what changed that? I mean, you bring up a very good point. Where and when did that change?
Because I'm making $3 million and you're not.
Is it just that simple? Money?
What was that?
No, it also changed around the middle of the 1980s when they started writing catalogs of values of what the autographs were worth.
Yes.
And so there became auctions where you could buy things signed by players at auction. And so now autographs became a commodity. And as Hal said, by the mid 1980s, the players figured out that a lot of these adults who were standing there waiting for these players to sign balls and bats and photos and so forth were doing so that they could go on eBay and sell these items. Baseball cards became the same thing. You and I, you collected wonderful baseball cards, but somewhere around 1980, baseball cards exploded. All of a sudden, a Mickey Mantle from 1953 became worth $1,000. Now it's worth, who knows how much it's worth. And now baseball cards are worthless.
See, and that's why I guess, for me, when I worked in the press, there was always that unwritten rule. Look, you don't ask players for autographs. That's not what you're there for. You're there to do a job. And
that's exactly right.
I can't tell you how many thousands of wonderful athletes that I could have had sign and I could have retired on that money, but it wasn't to be. I got lucky.
You have integrity.
I got lucky on occasion where I befriended some players and they signed things for me when I asked. Look, Dan Marino and Don Shula put together a wonderful football for my mom for Christmas one year, which actually had Shula, Marino, Mark Duper, and Mark Clayton on it because she was a big Dolphin fan. I didn't ask for it. They gave that to me as a gift, and I'm lucky enough to have a Walter Payton helmet. I met Walter, and he was at a signing, and I wanted to do an interview with him. I didn't ask for an autograph. And he said, "You want one?" Sure, how nice that is. But that's what we always knew. And when you saw the fans, the guys, the 50-year-olds at the time, who came out there 50 years old and 400 pounds and looked like they hadn't showered in 3.5 weeks and were loaded down with every piece of paraphernalia they could possibly put on their backpack, that's when things change. And I've had players even back then say, "I don't need the fans, man. All they're doing is making a buck off of me." But it would seem to me, guys, that boat has sailed. Is there any way that we're ever going to bring the fans back to the players again?
Your problem, Ed, is that you're not 13 years old anymore. The kids today still love the players, still would love to have an autograph from the players, not because it's worth money, but because it'd be a momentum of their being with that player.
But the players don't really spend a lot of time doing those autographs anymore. A lot of them shun them.
13 years old. You got to be a kid.
A lot of them shun them even with the parents are there with the kids. And not only that, I think somebody in the conversation here brought up safety. Hal, you might have brought that up as well. I know a lot of athletes out there who simply don't want to be around fans because they're afraid some nut job's carrying a knife, a gun, or something, and the next thing you know, they're going to wind up being in the front page at having been stabbed. I've had that told to me many times over the last 10
but
years.
They're now in Montana, living in Montana with the militia. Please, give me a break. Stop it.
Come on, it happens everywhere. It's not just in Montana.
Oh, they're part of the Philadelphia Phillies militia. You know, that pitcher, Steve Carlton and his boys. That's who that is.
Wow. Okay, Peter Golenbock will not be able to go into Philadelphia anytime soon.
It's not Philadelphia. It's Montana.
Or Montana. Well, you hit both of them.
That's two places you can't go.
Hey, out of curiosity's sake, just because we're here and you mentioned it, out of all the travels you've been to, and it's totally offline here, but first to you, Hal, which city did you go to where the fans were absolutely the nastiest?
The nastiest?
The worst fans. You didn't want to go there because you just didn't want to be around the attitude.
Philadelphia is a good candidate.
There you go.
Philadelphia is an awfully good candidate. I didn't like Minneapolis very much either.
Really?
I thought the fans were a little nuts there. I thought the fans were a little nuts in St. Louis.
I found the fans in St. Louis might have been a little nuts, but they seem to be a little calmer. They really seem to be calmer towards it. Peter, what about on all your travels?
Well, having written personal fouls, I tend to stay away from Raleigh, North Carolina.
a little too nuts for you there?
Personal fouls back in 1980 got Jim Valvano fired, and they have never forgiven me for it, believe me.
We'll make sure that I'm going to send this show now. Make sure it gets to an affiliate there just to see.
Thank you very much.
All right, back on track here. Let's get Peter his chance to talk about him here. Even though this is a strange Major League Baseball season, can we not say, I know Peter will say this right off the bat, that the best story in baseball this year has got to be the Tampa Bay Rays, love them or hate them, because they're the franchise that plays in the dome that is still sitting on land that could have been made and probably was made from some sort of a radioactive dump over the years.
Let's be nice. Be nice.
But you know I'm right. You know it was built on a toxic waste field, and that is still the worst.
What it really was
stadium in baseball.
Was African American churches and cemeteries and homes and so forth and so on. That's what they ripped up more than anything else, along with radioactive material.
Yeah, the radio. That's not even. That's just a little bit. It's there. But is it not fair to say that with all the other teams in there, you have the Dodgers and the Astros who've been good for so long, and you've had the Yankees, of course, that failed, and all these other teams. The Miami Marlins were a great story because they got in the playoffs for the first round based on that very good young pitching staff, but they couldn't hit a lick. But if you're going to look at the best story, Peter, hasn't it got to be Tampa Bay this season?
Well, so far it is. I mean, you look at the 1959 Chicago White Sox, which they call the hitless wonders. I'm waiting for somebody to figure out that the 2020 Tampa Bay Rays are the new hitless wonders. It's remarkable with our pitching so far in 3 games against Houston. They've scored exactly 5 runs, which is absolutely amazing. And we manage not to get very, very many hits, timely. But the other thing about our team, and something that I think even the season ticket holders and the crazy Rays fans hadn't realized, is just how sensational these players are on defense. You know, the entire infield is fabulous. Willie Adames. I venture to say nobody outside of St. Petersburg knows who Willie Adames is.
No, I think very few do. You're right.
Very few. Tell me the name of our third baseman. I dare you. There you
the
go.
Earthquake hit again.
And he's absolutely, again, with the earthquake.
With all of this, though, you're right. But is it proper to say that the reason why the Rays are such a good story is because they play in Tampa and the...
No, they don't.
Wait a minute. Hang on. They
Tampa.
play in St. Petersburg. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
They play in St. Petersburg, but they play in the Tampa Bay region, and they've
Yes.
still never really gotten the full-time year in and year out support that many people believe they deserve. And they've always been on the cheap. So to be that sort of a franchise and to get this close to the World Series, that in itself has to be the best story.
You believe in miracles?
I'm not sure, Mike Eruzione and Herb Brooks. And,
we do. We do.
Sure, I believe in miracles.
Every game we watch, we sit and grin for about 3 hours a night. It's beyond it's beyond understanding. You know, you got a first baseman hitting 220, a second baseman hitting 180, a shortstop hitting 195. Wendell Wendell's our third baseman. That's who nobody knows. He's the one hitting 300. But you got an outfield. They're fabulous fielders. Kiermaier, who's hitting 190. Hunter Renfro. I was going to say Hunter Pence, but no, it's Hunter Renfro. Hunter Renfro is hitting 130. You got a guy named Rosarina, who we never heard of. Who is this guy? Rosarina. He got on a boat.
Rosarina, God bless him.
He left Cuba and he went to Mexico and somehow showed up in St. Petersburg. And the guy has hit about 5 home runs in the postseason. Who is this guy? I mean,
you know why they're America's team?
Are we America's team? We're barely Tampa's team.
They're America's team, no question. They got under the skin of the evil empire, the New York Yankees.
Boy, did they.
They beat the Yankees 8 out of 10 in the regular season, and then they beat them in the playoffs. And anybody can beat the Yankees. That's America's team. And then they went from there to they're beating the Houston Astros, who are the cheaters. How can you not be America's team if you're getting retribution for what the Astros did to baseball a couple of years ago? So that's why they're America's team.
So then, Hal, in your perspective, then, are they, as I've touched with Peter on this, are they not the best story in Major League Baseball then this season?
Oh, without question. Oh, no question about it. They are by far. And another thing, something I wanted to point out to you. You mentioned all of these no-name players. Nobody knows who they are. Who's the best player in baseball? Mike Trout. Plays for the California or the Los Angeles Angels, whatever they call themselves this year. You know how many times I've seen Mike Trout play here in New York? He's been in the majors maybe half a dozen years. I've seen him play maybe 5 times because the schedule is such that you don't get to see all the players. If you're a Mets fan or a Yankee fan here in New York, you see only the players that come with their teams into New York. And it's very, very difficult because I'd like to see Mike Trout. I'd like to see what he does. Clearly, he's the best player in baseball. The numbers prove it.
All you have to do, though, is buy the package. I mean, that's enough. You spend the money, you can buy. That's what people will snap back and say, buy the baseball package. You can watch him every night.
You can watch him on your little phone. You can watch him on your phone.
Careful, Hal. Here comes Peter now. He's going to bring his smartphone out and say, don't worry about it, Hal. You can watch it. See?
There it is. There. You could watch it on your phone.
I don't do
but
that.
I think I know what Hal is saying here, because you'd still like to be able to see the players, see them play. But you don't get all the chances anymore because of so many teams.
I don't have a telephone number that's connected to this. This is just a phone. It doesn't connect to a number. You can't text me. You got to write me a letter.
That is true. That is true. You cannot text Peter Golenbock. It's very true.
No.
But you have to at least be able to get to the game, to see them, to appreciate. And I think that, again, comes down to that separation that we talked about earlier between fan and athlete. We had the chance to see them, to know them. But even with all the media these days, I think we know the players less than we ever knew before.
When I discovered baseball, there were 8 teams in each league, and each league had a champion at the end of the season. Those 2 champions played in the World Series. Now, until you get to the World Series, you've got to go through 3 or 4 rounds of playoffs. And it's wearying. It wears you out. It wears me out. By the time we get to the World Series, it's almost anticlimax for me.
I know, but the worst day of the year is the day after that last World Series game. The feeling of emptiness, not to have baseball again until the next April, is just horrible.
Okay, see, you and I kind of work in different sports. To me, it's the day after the Boston Bruins exit the Stanley Cup playoffs. The day after everything kind of stops, and then I go in and I look at the schedule and I go, okay, who's left playing? All right, I'll root for this team against this team. I'll root for this team. I'll root against Toronto. I'll root against these. That's all I got left at that point.
You can root for the Lightning. Oh, by the way,
never.
Which is the National Hockey League champion?
Never.
It happens to be the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Never. I would rather eat ground glass than root for the Lightning. Now that's become a rivalry now, because it used to be the Bruins. We used to care about what happened with Toronto, but Toronto has stunk for so long, and so has Montreal. Now we care more about Tampa Bay than anything else. we had a
We've
million
got
other things to do here, but we're running out of time, so I want to make sure we get this at the end of every show. I give everybody a chance for what I call the toss-up, which we've talked about a number of things, but if there's something else, and usually there's something that everybody else has on their mind that they want to make sure that they get in here, whatever it is, I don't care. Throw it out. Mr. Golenbock, to you first. Give us your toss-up.
Well, the toss-up is something that may very well occur tonight at 8:47. How they start a game at 8:47 and expect us to be awake by the ninth inning, it's just, oh my goodness. You take that 5-hour energy drink somewhere around the fifth or sixth inning so that you can stay awake for the damn thing. But if the Tampa Bay Rays should somehow beat the Houston Astros tonight, to sweep the Houston Astros, it will be one of the most improbable, incredible victories. The idea that the Tampa Bay Rays with this, let's put it this way, the Yankees have 3 players, each of whom makes more money than the entire staff of the Tampa Bay Rays. Stanton makes more money all by himself than all of the Tampa Bay Rays put together. It's unbelievable that these guys are going to the World Series to play the Atlanta Braves. I don't think the Dodgers are going to make it. That's just going to be, I don't know, more fun than I can handle.
Spoken like a true season ticket holder, I do have to say. All
Yes.
right, Hal, to you next on the toss-up. What's sitting on your mind these days?
I want an end to the pandemic. I want to be able to go in the street without a mask. I want to be able to go to a ball game. I want them to play 162 games next season, so it'll be a legitimate major league season. Those are the things I want. I want a return to normalcy. I don't want to live this strange life that I'm living.
I think you speak for everybody, and
Yes, you do.
unfortunately,
You certainly do.
I don't know when it's going to end. Nobody does. And having been around a number of medical professionals in my family and in my close circle of friends, the ones who are really smart and do this for a living, tell me, buckle up, kid. It's going to be a little while.
Yeah, wear your mask. Stay safe.
I have, it's not within my, hold it a sec here. It's right in the studio, just so you see. You know, I have a mask here.
Very nice.
You're loyal. We say that for you.
I'm loyal to my team. I have my Bruins mask. I have another one in the car just in case, and I have the regular paper mask. So
I just want you to know something. Phil Esposito, still living in Tampa, still going strong.
I love Phil. Phil was on my show in Boston. We did a show called Sports Pulse on the Comcast network in Boston. And I had Phil on a couple of times in studio. And all I did was just tell stories with him.
That's all. He's one of the greats.
I would love to interview him again sometime. I'd love to be able to catch up with him because he's a great storyteller. Let's remind everybody about all the important stuff now. We have come to that point where let's promote so that everybody on the audio podcast can hear and everybody here can see as well, because we have some business to take care of. Peter Golenbock, of course, New York Times best-selling author. Just look up his name and you'll find all the number of books that he's written. Certainly, if you go to Amazon, you'll find him there. Books like The Bronx Zoo, Bums, the Mickey Mantle novel. Just a few I threw in there that are actually 3 of my favorites. If you want to get a hold of him on Twitter, you go to Peter Golenbock. Facebook, it is Peter.Golenbock. And in case you're wondering, I just thought I'd do this. Peter's got 40-plus books on sports and athletes. I counted. So I don't know who's doing your PR, but they need to call me right away because I can take care of all that for you right away. Hal Bock, wonderful human being. Hal, you are a true professional in this. He's been doing this more than 4 years covering sports, and for the Associated Press especially. If you want to get a hold of Hal, you can go to his Facebook, which is hal.bock. That's where he is on occasion. Book that Hal wrote. I wanted to make sure to get this in there. Banned Baseball and Blacklist of All-Stars and Also-Rans, which is in there, which is still a great book to read. And by the way, you're still teaching at Long Island University, right?
No, I'm retired now.
Okay.
I'm just sitting in front of my computer and writing a column every so often. That's about it.
Where's the column? Where can we catch the column?
There's a local website here in New York called New York Sports Day.
Okay.
And I write a column a week, sometimes 2 a week for them. And it's on the web, NY Sports Day.
I'm writing that down right now. Because I'm going to put that on my list of sites that I have to visit every day, so I don't have to go to some of the other sites on a regular basis.
There you go.
Gentlemen, this has been awesome. I hope to have you both on again sometimes here on the Sports Reporters, because the knowledge and the fun that we've had in this is far and away anything that we could ever catch on network television, and all the babbling and bluster that goes on with some of these boobs that simply just want to go ahead and throw spit out there and have us be happy about it. I thank you so much for doing this, and in light of what Hal said too, please be safe, and for your families, be safe.
Thank you so much, Ed.
It's always a pleasure. There it is. Peter Golenbock and Hal Bock. We are going to see, there it is. It's Berliner, Bock, and Golenbock. We could have started a law firm here if we thought about this.
There you go.
Whatever we do that. I never thought about that. Bock and Golenbock. There you go. Make sure that you visit their websites. Don't forget, you're going to find out in just a couple of seconds where you can find The Man in the Arena, both in audio podcast and in video form. And make sure you join us live as much as you can. For Peter Golenbock, for Hal Bock, for everybody here, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Until we meet again, rock on, true believers. See ya! Be sure to stay connected on social media with questions, comments, conundrums, you name it. It's at Berliner Speaks on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. A great place to talk business and learn a lot more about what we do is simply check us out on LinkedIn. Just go there and search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that every single episode of The Man in the Arena is uploaded to YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com, or if you're on YouTube, search out Ed Berliner Media. If you would prefer to listen to The Man in the Arena, every episode is available for download on all the major audio podcast platforms. The Man in the Arena is produced by Entourage Management, LLC, and Entourage Media.